So this month has been entirely focused on men. That's what June has been about. We've talked about healing, we've talked about masculinity and the importance of being vulnerable as a man. And as we close out the month of June, I wanted to talk about the hurt that men endure, but it started when they were boys. And because of the stereotypes and the unwillingness to understand men from a societal standpoint, I believe that this leaves men to be trapped within a lot of rigid expectations and limited emotional expression. And from a young age, boys are often taught to suppress their feelings, to be strong, and to avoid any display of vulnerability. And this societal conditioning creates a cycle. It creates a cycle of emotional neglect where men find it challenging to seek support or openly discuss their plan. However, the unresolved childhood trauma, it carries into their adulthood. So now we're talking about men who experience things as boys, but it also impacts them as men. And so what this does, it shapes their interactions within society, their relationships, and their approach to fatherhood. And the reason why this is essential to understand, because it helps us avoid certain pitfalls, such as creating divisions between men and women in relationships. So as we can see, there's a lot of division now in terms of conversation out here in these social media streets, failing to empathize with one another and neglecting the vital role men play as fathers. And what I wanted to do today was I wanted to bring a good friend of mine to discuss. And Shon's been on the podcast before about 2 years ago. And the reason why I brought Shon, because Shon is out here in these streets, right? He's out here in these government streets. He's out here in these organization streets. Like, he's out here actually doing the work to help men, which is why I wanted to bring him on. Some people just have a mic and they just talk. And that is not what we do here at this podcast. I want to bring men on who are not only knowledgeable, but have done the work within themselves and also helping and coming out into the communities and helping people. And so my guest for today is Shon Hart. Shon is the executive director of Involved Dad and Family Matters Supervised Visitation and Exchange Center. He's a married father of 3, a premier keynote speaker, and a leading authority on fatherhood. He brings over 10 years of collective work experience managing and leading fatherhood initiatives. He serves on various boards whose focus is empowering and making a difference in their communities. And as an executive director of Involved Dad, he supports and trains practitioners, government agencies, and researchers on how to ensure fathers contribute to the healthy well-being of their children. And he's also a 5-time published author, and he is launching his 6th book, which we will be talking about, titled Broken Boys Become Broken Men. That will be released next week, July 1st. Okay, July 2023. And so without further ado, Shon, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad I got you on. Thank you for my last minute shenanigans, because I've done this whole month, but I appreciate you
Hey, it's
being
all
here.
good. It's all good. You family, man. It's all good. I'm glad to be here, especially to talk about this topic, right? Like this is super dope. So I appreciate you taking the time to making this a priority to have this much needed and difficult discussion. So yeah, man.
Yeah. And that's why we need to talk about it, because it is difficult and people don't want to have difficult conversations. But in order for us to come together, we got to talk about the most vulnerable things. And so I was on your website and I read something, and I'm just going to kind of pull a couple of different sentences that you said about yourself. You said, I denied it for a long, long time. And I would say to myself and to others that I did not have a problem, and they didn't have the right to say that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to talk about that, because I want to know from you as a man, when you realized that you had a problem, like when people used to tell you that you had a problem, what was it that you were in denial about?
Yeah, so it wasn't, the thing about it when I say people was telling me I had a problem,
Mm-hmm.
it was two. Some was verbally, but
Okay.
some was through like the actions, right? Like I was denying the results that I was producing.
Okay.
Right. Or not producing, right, in the interactions that I would see how I would connect with certain men, and certain men I couldn't connect with, right? Or I would shrink in the presence of certain men. And when I had to start doing that work, and noticing, because I was shut down in other areas, people would see me act differently in certain rooms. And so their questioning me, was valid. But my thing is like, mind your business. You don't see that, right? Because I'm trying to deny it. I'm struggling by myself. Like, nobody sees this. Nobody. And that was quite the opposite. Like, people were seeing that, and it was showing up in my relationship with people who I did have authority, that thought that I had authority over, right? So my wife, and as an example, is like where she manages money. She's a better money manager than me. But my thing was like, nope, you're not running this. And so I was the one that had a big hand in it. And we wound up filing bankruptcy, homie. Like, because
What?
you horrible, Shon, at that time, you was bad at managing money. So how dare you be the one to manage it, right? But that had everything to do with how I was feeling insecure, right? I was feeling insecure. Didn't really want to. I was looking at, because I wasn't good in this area, I looked at it as a weakness, right? So here's another thing that I'm struggling with. So now I want to prove to you that I'm not, right? So it was those little things there where I started putting some of those things together. And it was a plethora of other things that started me to take a close look at what my problem was.
No, that's good. And so what gave you the revelation to say, you know what, this is a problem, I need to do something about it? So what took you out of denial,
Yeah.
or, and coming to this place of awareness that this is not only just an issue that I need to be aware of, I need to now act on doing something about it?
Because I struggled for quite some time, right? So it wasn't that I wasn't aware of it. I was aware of it, but I just kept denying it. And I was able to hide behind other successes, right? So I was able to hide behind other successes. So I never had to deal with it, but I was always having that conversation with myself. Like, all right, Shon, you got to do better. Shon, you have to do better. And it got to a place to where I was almost backed in the corner. But then I had that come into Jesus moment with myself. Is like, yo, if you want better, you have to do something different, right? And what is that different? And for me, it was uncomfortable to have to start now doing that real internal work, because now it's like, yo, you got to deal with your fears, your phobias, the things that nobody knows. You have to address that. Right. And so I got to that place where I didn't, and you hear me say a lot of times, don't be a public success and a private failure.
Yeah.
And that's what I was starting to feel like, because on the outside, people were seeing all of this stuff. Right. And it wasn't grandiose, but it was me, I was having a level of success, but internally, man, I was a fraud. And it was a heavy lift every single day to put on this mask, to keep people away so they wouldn't see what was popping. And so though it was moments of me being by myself and starting to help other men and help other people, that was forcing me to start looking at me. It's like, bro, you can't keep going down this path without working on you, because you're being a fraud.
No, that's good. And so this inner work that you were referring to, because I promise you, that's the hardest thing to do. Listen,
It is.
that it sounds so, when people talk about it, it sounds like it's just so blissful. Stuff is hard. And
very.
confronting you, where it's all ownership, it's all accountability, it's no more blame, it's no more pointing the finger, it's Shon and God. And I would like to know from you, what were some of the things that you had to identify within yourself that may have impacted you as a young boy, that you realize impacted you as an adult, as a man?
Yeah. So is a couple of things. I was exposed to pornography when I was like probably maybe like 7, 8, maybe like 9, somewhere between 7 and 9. I was exposed to pornography. And so I was into football. So I was going to watch. This was during the time when you can record on a VHS. You could record it on TV, and then you could watch that sucker over and over. And so I popped in one of my father's VHS tapes. And the crazy thing about it, the teams that was about to play was the Rams and the Bears. That's who was about to play. And I wanted to go and see Eric Dickerson. And when I put that sucker on, it was pornography. And so I was exposed to that real early, not knowing what it was. All I know was like, yo, this made me feel good on the inside, right? And so that right there was the beginning of my view on women, on the exchange with women, right? And then seeing how my father interacted with my mother, right? Wasn't very affectionate, right? It wasn't very affectionate, very loving. It was just like they both existed. But I knew they had children. And so I knew how children, learned how children came into this world. So it shaped my mind from the viewpoint that women were objects. It was just an exchange, right? And then I had my brothers who reinforced that. And so that was a part that came into my adulthood, came into my marriage, to where I didn't know how to be consistently affectionate. I knew how to be affectionate, give her what she wanted when I wanted something, but for it to be a way of life, that was a heavy lift. And so that crept into my dating, into my marriage, where I had to address it, because I thought affection and all that type of stuff meant, or intimacy meant having sex, and it wasn't. So that was a big part that impacted. And the other thing that impacted me, that was just one of the ways how, because I talk in my book, and I know we'll get there, but I talk about this one chapter about the mask men wear. And so I look at that, is that the dog mask, right? That's the mask that I call the dog mask. And that dog mask, objectifies women. It's all about, just how much they can get from women or their partners and all of that type of stuff. So they put this mask on to show themselves as being domineering or, chauvinistic, all of this stuff to try to engage women to get what they want. It's just all about an exchange. And so that was something that I had to address, because it was hurting my marriage. My wife wanted more, and I didn't know how to give her more. But it started when I was a little boy, right? And so I talk about in there, as well as when my son or my daughters have had difficult times. The beautiful thing about them having me present is that I was able to help them navigate those difficult moments in live time. So they didn't have enough time to process these situations on their own, come up with their own conclusions of like, yo, this is what it is, without having, so me, when I encountered that, nobody was there to explain that to me.
Right. Yeah.
Right. They weren't there to tell me like, yo, this is that, or you shouldn't have been, or whatever. It was no explanation. So I came up with my own conclusion. So with my children, I am present, so that way when they have those moments, I'm there to be able to help them process. Right. And that was super important to me. And then the other aspect is when my father called me small. right?
Ooh,
He called me
yeah.
small.
And you
When I
internalize that as,
Yeah, and I'm not good enough, that
yeah.
that my stature, I can't control my stature. So now everywhere I go, if
Mhm.
somebody's bigger than me, I'm looking through the lens of I'm less than because I'm smaller. And so smaller didn't just mean in my stature. Now it's like in the academic room, it's in competition because he told me I was small. So here, nobody's explaining to me,
Yeah.
right? I'm internalizing it because I don't know who I can go to say, yo, I feel insecure. Well, you don't just tell people you feel insecure. You laughed
Mhm.
at. You murdered for doing that.
Mhm.
So now you become this grown man and people wonder, why do you respond that way? It wasn't that deep. Well, I'm thinking I'm too small.
Right. Something deeper than the surface.
Oh, is deeper than the surface. You know what I mean? Why
Mm.
daddy blowing up like that? Because I can't control this situation. You're not listening to me. I feel like I'm too small. So now the only way for me to get you to listen to me, little people, is for me to assert my size and my voice and my threats, little
Mm.
people, you little
Right.
humans.
Mm. Ah, man, that's good. Um, Now I know that you work directly with men. So let me be clear, y'all. We ain't talking about virtual. We're talking about up close and personal. And you work with quite a few men. You interact with courts. So Shon, when I say he's out here, he's out here. You connect with organizations. And when working with men in these environments, what are some internal challenges that you find them facing that they've never admitted to anyone else?
Oh man, so many, right? Some of
Mm-hmm.
them just like sexual assaults that
Mm,
happen against them, that they never really addressed, until they're grown and still haven't talked about it, but they current that trauma. We had an intern with us this past summer, and we tasked her with doing some individual counseling with some of the fathers. And so if the listeners out there are familiar with ACEs and all of that stuff, that adverse childhood trauma, right? So what she does, she take them through this series of questions about trauma. And studies show that it's very low. I think it's like 7% of people in the United States had at least one trauma. I think it was like 7%, at least one trauma. She did a study with about, I think it was like 20 of my fathers.
mm-hmm.
They had an average of 10 traumas out of the 12 she asked them. 10 out of 12, or it might have been 10 out of 15. Man, I wish I had the data right in front of me, but it was more than half on this sheet to see if you was exposed to this form of trauma. And the crazy thing is that because what we are trying to see is that did their trauma have a direct impact on how they father and how
Mm,
they interact with their woman partners? In this small study, it showed it was a direct impact, right? It was a direct impact for more than one reasons. And one of the crazy things, um, Tanya, is that most of the dads didn't even consider some of the trauma that was on the list was trauma. They just
mm,
thought it as just everyday way of life, right? Not thinking what they were exposed to was trauma. And so that was really interesting to us when we saw that. And I'm like, yo, that makes sense why it's easier for some of these guys to leave, right? Because they don't really see the impact of their decisions as being traumatic. because it happened to them, right? Of being abandoned, right? Or being exposed to, violence in the home. Like, yo, that's just what we do.
Right. So they didn't see that as a issue.
No, them calling the mom bees and out her name and all that type of stuff. No, but they was exposed to that. But in their mind, that wasn't trauma. That's just like, yo, that's just what we do. And so those are some of the things that the men experience, but the sexual assaults. And what people don't realize, that a lot of guys that I work with, they talk about when their parents broke up and they no longer had access to their father because mom and dad had this beef. And so now dad is not coming around, right? And all they can remember is mom talking about he's not paying child support, or he got that B over there. And so now he can't go over there to his father's house. And so that type of stuff impacts them. And mom may have other guys coming in and out of the house, being exposed to these other men, mom's boyfriend sexually assaulting them, being bullied when they were younger, growing up in a drug-infested area, not wanting to get into that, but being forced to get into it. So it's a lot of those things that guys talk about, and a lot of it, man, especially mom's boyfriends. I mean, that's a lot of moms' boyfriends hitting on their moms, or treating them some type of way. That a lot of them carry a lot of that type of trauma, and a lot of and quite a few of them really struggle with the relationship with their child's mother. That's a huge one.
It is. And oh my gosh, Shon, I wanted to talk about that too, because it's so, there's a lot of conversation about the man and the father, but we don't talk a lot about his relationship with his mother. And I know this is a touchy topic, but it's just what it is.
Yep.
There are mothers who are toxic, who are narcissistic, who are verbally and emotionally abusive. And I want you to talk about it, because that mother and son relationship is not always what people think it is.
Yep.
So I'm glad you talked about, I'm glad you referenced it.
Yeah. Quite a few of them, and quite a few of them talk about how their mothers have really destroyed their confidence. Their personal mothers, right, have destroyed their personal confidence by putting her next boyfriend, or whatever the case, before the child, right? And the way that she communicates with them. One of the things I do with my wife, because she's a woman, right, and she doesn't know a lot of the things that may trigger boys, or whatever the case. And so in our family dynamics is that we allow each other to lead in the area of that gender, right? So she allows me to lead when it comes to my son Levi. I allow her to lead when it comes to my daughters. And I'm telling you, man, if you guys can just be in the Hart household, I'm like, my wife is more introverted. I'm like, man, we would make much money if we was just to show the Hart household. Because the crazy thing about it is, like, what people see in public, like when we be doing, like, that's what we really do. We have like real family meetings, and we cringe and like have like real discussions, right? Laugh and cry as a whole squad. Like, it's real. And so we will go through these things, like where my daughters, like if they're in dating, or like I'm cringing, like, yo, that strategy is whack, right? I'm like, as a father, I'm like, yo, I'm cringing, man. Like, yo. And so I'm giving her the male perspective, and, we just come to our conclusion. I'm like, all right, I trust it. All right. You know what I mean? And so we do that on purpose, right? And so when I'm talking about my wife, and you talk about this whole mother, son, my wife, she's a screamer. right? If the kids are not moving, like she's yelling upstairs and I'm cringing. I'm like, man, would you? Right. And so I get it. I do. I see your face. I see your face.
Listen, I'm
Right. I see your face.
Mhm.
So what I had to tell her, I said, babe, I just need you when it comes to our son, I need you to consider how you communicate. I said it hits boys differently.
Mhm.
Right? When you are giving him instructions, I know the mama part now. When he jacking up, it is what it is. But when you communicate with him, I need you to be real intentional on how you communicate and not destroy his confidence. Right? It's just something about a man when he is feeling like he's being talked down upon. Women may feel some type of way, it hurt or whatever. I'm just saying it hits us a certain type of way to where it can spiral out of control. And so we've talked about that, and she has done a 180 when I began to break things down to her, whatever. And so she like, okay, well, you have to lead in this area. And I'm like, I'm cool. I'm cool. So I know how to talk man of the holding him accountable without emasculating him, right? Where he can take some ownership. And so it's important, like when we talk about this of that mother and son relationship, it's vital and it's important for moms to be careful how they communicate, because a lot of these dads that I work with, they have a hard time working with their child's mom because the child's mom knows how to go low, right?
Mm.
Know how to go low. And most dudes are not real quick with their words, right? So if I can't respond as quick as you can with your words, all right, you disrespected me, right? You make me feel some type of way. So now that man, a lot of times he's gonna shut down, right? Like physically shut down. Or sometimes that's where you get guys, being physically abusive, right? Because they like, yo, I don't know any other way. And I'm not justifying that at all. I work with men who batter, but I'm just telling you, we having a candid conversation of some guys don't feel like they have the necessary tools. Like, man, how do I manage this? And so that's why I'm really involved in my son's life, where when I'm seeing his emotions, because I'm like, I need him to know how to manage them now, because when he gets bigger, I want him to be able to manage them. I don't want him to feel like he can't control them and he's putting his hand on somebody's child. And we don't have a problem with that.
Mm. No, I'm so glad that you address this. So when you work with these men to unpack that stuff, because that's a lot to unpack. That's not something you just unpack in a day. I mean, this is a new way of living, a new way of being. What does that do for them in regards to how they show up as fathers, how they show up as men, even how they interact with the mom?
Yeah. Man, it's a great question, right? Because and all three of them is differently, for real.
Mm,
All three, they walk on eggshells when it comes to the child's mom.
they do.
Eggshell,
Mm,
eggshells. Because the thing about it, they're like, man, if I make the wrong move, I won't see my child. If she's the gatekeeper, if I make the wrong move, there's a very good chance I may not see my child again, or I won't be able to see him till 2, 3, 4 months from now, right? So they walk on eggshells in that area. The crazy thing is that some of the services that we provide for some of these guys is that we provide legal assistance, right, in the area with some of them that may need a parenting time order because they may not have the resources to get an attorney to get something documented, right? Because I'm like, how often do you see a child? I don't know, whenever she let me. I'm like, yo, you have a right to be able to see your child more consistently.
right.
Well, when we good, I can see him whenever I want. But when she's mad at me, she hold them. So I'm like, yo, you need a parenting time order. I know you don't like the courts. I know you don't like dealing with the man. You don't like dealing with the system, but you need something documented that says, hey, you know, unfortunate you have to do that, but you may need something to say, you get the child this day, this day, this day, whatever the case. And a lot of times they like, I don't want that, because now they afraid of other repercussions.
Yeah.
So they just like, man, could you just see if you can help us just better communicate, right? So that's that part of where my man, who's big and burly on the outside, but man, when it comes to that, he's shrinking, doesn't know what he can do. On the aspect of when we having these conversations with their children, the children is never an issue, right? They got that thing down packed. The ones that I will have, the ones who has the most difficult reconnection are the ones where the other partner has said a lot of negative stuff about the child. Because I would get a mom said, you know, I don't know if my daughter or my son, they're gonna be very afraid, they're gonna be standoffish, they're gonna be this, you know, they're gonna be like just saying all of these things, right? They're gonna be afraid, they don't really want to come, they've been crying at night, all types of stuff, right? And the crazy thing about it, Tanya, is that when the child gets there, not one of those things is the issue. Most of the time that child will run to the dad like, daddy, right? You know, hugging on them. And when we do reconnection, we tell them that it is child-led. So the dad cannot lead with affection, right? It has to be all child-led. And the children are the ones that initiates that. And a lot of times the children don't want to leave. They're like, I don't want to leave right now, right? So those interactions are like beautiful when it comes to that, right? With the reconnection, most time it works. We have some cases where, you know, we have a current case where it's getting better, but the daughter is on the other side of the room, the dad is on this side of the room. And my monitors that's in the room, they just like, man, like, this is weird. Should we make, like, no, we don't make them connect. Dad is afraid. Dad doesn't know what to do. This child doesn't know this parent, right? So all we're doing is creating a safe space for them to reconnect. So we coach dad afterwards on how he could start building this relationship. But you can tell that the other party, the mom, has been feeding stuff to the child to make the child afraid of dad, even though dad never did nothing to child, right? So we have to handle those situations with care. So I want to pause there, allow you, you know, to ask questions around there, but it's different in the different phases. Tanya, is different, is different. And when, and I'll just say this lastly, when, as it relates to the other men, they struggle with connecting with the men, but in our groups, after probably 3 weeks, about 3 weeks, that's when the masks start coming off. The first 2-3, I would say the first 2-3 weeks, those masks are on, they're smart, they quiet, they're stoic, but then there's somebody in the group that will say something that they can relate to.
And it creates a whole
different energy in the room. And then we can't get rid of those jokers.
I love that. I know that's good. It's almost like the same thing in my program. You know, it starts that third week.
Yep.
That vulnerability really starts to show up. And it's a beautiful feeling to see and witness. Now, you said a lot, and I'm glad that you didn't make it cookie cutter, because different relationships, we're talking about the mother, that's a different relationship. And that will impact the relationship with the child. It's just automatic. And, you know, Shon, I'm gonna be honest with you. And I know there are a certain group of men that you do work with, and it seems that a lot of the issue is with the mother. And one of the things that I hear on my side, right, because I want to talk about that too, is if a man experienced life without his father. So this is what some women are thinking or even saying. So if he experienced life without his father or had limited involvement,
Mm-hmm.
why would he exhibit similar behavior? And I think, because I think what people might believe is that, well, if you know how this feels, why would you do it?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Man, that's a great point. So what I was going to say earlier too, you just triggered that, right? Because we was talking when you was talking about these guys when we did the study, um, when we was doing the study, it came out that some of these guys who experience an absentee father,
Okay.
right? They were, watch this, they were mad at the father for not being present and made his mother almost like this saint, right? Because the father wasn't there. He was the evil one. Mom had the kids, which was him. She was the saint. Now he's the father in this situation. You know who's the evil one? The mother of his children is the evil one, because he is identifying, he thinks he has the same situation as the mother. That's who he's identifying with his own mother, and he cannot identify with his father. He doesn't see himself as being the man that he despised, because he chooses to identify, and most of us want to identify with comfort. And so he's trying to identify like, hey, I'm a victim. My mother was a victim and I'm the victim over here. Instead of looking at his child's mother as like, yo, she's no different than your mom in some of the behaviors that you doing, bro. But they're clouded by that because they don't want to, as people, we don't want to feel pain and judgment and rejection, right? They go into that victim stance. So when we look at the data talks about the impact of an absentee father. When a father is not present, how it impacts children, right? And so the thing about it is that most of these kids who grow up without a father, they are learning. They are angry. They are upset. They are, let's just keep on, they are pissed, right? And so just because I don't have access to this father and I didn't see and I know how this make me feel, but I still don't know how to be this man. I don't know how to show up to give affection. I don't know what it looked like to be what I never had, unless somebody step in and demonstrate and show me what that's supposed to really, really look like. And that's what I went back when I was telling you earlier, that it was important for me to be present when my children go through certain things, so that way I can help them navigate and process it. Here's these little boys are growing up without a father who's here to help them process when they feel certain things, and create in an environment for them to say that it's okay, let me bring this to mom. Let me bring this to such and such so I can get a different perspective about this. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a perfect sense. And I believe that also in that, the misconception is that they don't love their children.
Yeah, that's the furthest from the truth. Yeah, and this is the thing, is that they love their children. I was talking to a dude last night. It's crazy that you bring this up. And this dude, and I see him through. I had to start seeing people through God's eyes, right? So
Don't overlook that.
man, I'm telling
That
you,
that right there is, yeah. No, I mean, I know you said it all casual. I'm like, no, that changed me. I told my
yeah,
clients that the other day, I had to learn how to see people like God sees them. I had to see them at who God created them to be, not for how they are functioning in the world.
yeah,
That
yeah,
changed me a lot.
yeah. Because I was at the gas station last night, right? And I saw a dude who was in my program, and And as he walked by, and most time dudes, you know, when they see me out and about, they giving me love because I done did this, right? So we fist bumped, he kept going. And so I'm like, that was weird. So I got my gas, and he stuck his head in this just gas station. He's like, Shon, you know, I was gonna hit you up, man, but I just got caught up and da da da. I'm like, yo, bro, you good, man? I'm like, yo, it's all good. So I get, I pay for my gas and walk outside. He wait for me. He want to talk. So he says to me, he says, I just want to come to you as a man. When you told me that my ex-wife called you, and you wanted to talk to me, I felt some type of way. I was like, why? And he is like, because, you was talking to her and, and I don't know what she was saying. And, and I just don't want people to be judging me and da, 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 da. I mean, he's going through that whole thing, judging me, I don't know what she was saying. And, so he's going, so I'm calm. I'm looking at him. Right. And so once he got done, I was like, yo, I said, answer this question, bro. I said, man, have I ever judged you? Have I ever judged anybody in that space? And I said, y'all done said some foul stuff. I said, have I judged y'all? No, but no. Let's not go there. I said, have I ever judged you? He's like, no. I said, so let me ask you this question, bro. Is it me or is it you? I said, no judgment. I said, let's just keep it 100. Since you coming to me, I'm coming to you. Is it me or is it you? Right. And so I bring this story up because when he enrolled in the program, he wanted access to his kids. And I tell people, the dads, when they come in, every case is individual. Right. And so I can't really provide the best service if mom don't talk to me, because I don't know what he did or was popping. Like, how can we really do this? Well, this mom, after months and months, she finally did respond, and she like, yo, the reason why I want to be involved, she's like, I had to run from him. He was very abusive, very, very abusive. And she said, because we tried to talk to her several times, and she's like, you know what? So, well, since he has to be involved, or whatever the case, I just want to be honest. She said, but you promised me that you won't tell him all of the things that I said to you and all that. And I said, absolutely. I said, so she disclosed. So I didn't even say anything to him. I just said to him, like, hey, we finally got a call back from mom, and I want you to come down to the office so we can talk. This brother went underground. He ran away. He went bye-bye because he didn't want to do the work.
Yeah, that's a real thing. I've had people who couldn't work with. They didn't want to do the work.
He didn't want to do the work. And so last night talking to him, he was like, yeah, I know she probably was saying this and saying that. I'm just sitting there all calm. I'm like, bro, that doesn't matter to me. I said, what I tell you in the beginning, what's most important is your child, bro. He said, but I'm not going to kiss nobody but. I'm like, whoa. Is your lens is the problem right now, because you consider exhausting all of your options, kissing butt, to get access to your child.
Right.
So I don't want to belabor that, but we had to go down through there, and this is like 12 o'clock at night. And I'm like, I'm off work. I'm like, yo, I'm taking my time to talk to this joker. But it's people like him that is hurting.
Yeah.
That's hurting. So I'm looking beyond all of what he's saying, but I'm like, he's hurting.
Yeah, that's all it is. Mm-hmm.
Right. And he's afraid to touch that part of him because now he has to be accountable.
Yep. That's real.
He has to be accountable, and he doesn't want to be accountable if he is being abusive. He doesn't want to have to be accountable if he does have an alcohol problem. He doesn't want to be accountable if he's not consistent when it comes to his child. He may feel like, yo, I can't be the best version of myself that my child need me to be, so I'm just going to keep blaming my child's mother. It's her. No, bruh. No. You don't want to clean up your house.
Yeah. And so I know I kind of like,
it's all good.
went over the question that I originally had, but I needed people to understand how it is important to see people at the heart of really who they were designed to be, because it gets rid of being biased and being judgmental. I mean, you really got to understand that. And so to be able to do the work that you're doing too. And so going back to loving the children, because I think a lot of the time this is where the hurt on the women's side feels like, okay, well, he doesn't love my children. And I don't think that's what it is, but I wanted you to talk about it from what you hear, what you experience in terms of what that really means.
Yeah. So no, I tell you, man, they do love their children. They love their children more than anything, because when they had the child, they're looking at it as like, man, I'm gonna give this child what I never had. Right.
Yeah.
That's what they're looking at. They're like, man, I'm going to give them everything that I couldn't afford. I'm gonna do all of that stuff. What this struggle comes in is that a lot of them doesn't know what it means to fight and fight fair. So when opposition comes, it's easy for them to run. They don't want to be rejected. Yeah. Right. At the end of the day, they don't want to be rejected. They don't want, when mom put up, these walls, just saying, hey, this is how it has to be. Or if mom has the authority to dictate when dad has access or not, a lot of times the dad feel that as some more rejection. I don't have control. So it's easier for me to leave than to stay and have to deal with more feelings of rejection. That's where a lot of the core comes from. So it's not that it's unfortunate, because it's like, yo, well, you just thinking about you and you feeling rejected, but what about your child?
Right.
To them, it's more painful for them to stay. It's as much as they love their child, they hate that pain more. Them not loving their child, they just see it as, you know what, my child will be all right. My child will probably be better off without me, because where I am, I can't fight this hurt too much. They used to being hurt, rejected, internalizing. So here's this one thing, this one person, this one human that I have, and I can't get. So you know what? I'm gonna just walk away. That's what I did when I had my clothing store years ago. Right? It was easier for me to stop going into the office than to go into the office and not see customers come in. So I stopped going to the office and had my employees call me and tell me how much money we made, even though it wasn't going to change if I was there or not there, but it was too painful for me to see it every single day.
Right. So avoiding it was.
So I avoided it.
Right.
I avoided it. And so that's what a lot of the guys do. They avoid it, even though the situation may remain the same. They're like, listen, it's less painful for me just to walk away than for me to keep fighting and still keep getting rejected. Because I could have kept going to the store every single day. My results wasn't going to change at this point. I was going to make just say $5 whether I went or didn't, but it was too painful for me to go. That wasn't the right answer, but that's where I was at that state of not knowing how to fight. And so that was one of the things I had to learn how to deal with my trauma of doing the internal work, of learning how to get a different result, of persevering through the no's, persevering through the hurt, persevering through the trauma.
Oh, that's good. That is so good. And have you seen any of these men reconnect with their parents? Yeah. Even outside of their children, have they, because some of the things that you mentioned were their relationship with their mothers.
Yeah.
And have you experienced them reconnecting in a much healthier way, even with their parents, or just knowing how to intelligently manage that relationship in a better way?
Yeah, I've seen some, right? I've seen more successes with more of them coming to their own self-conclusion, their own resolve within themselves.
That's good.
Of dealing with those circumstances, right? Rather than their reconciliation with their parents or whatever the case, I've seen more of a bigger shift in personal behavior, right? And their personal mindset, like, man, all right, this is not the end of the world. This is how I can handle this. This is how I can handle that. Yeah. So
as
that's
well
why
as just I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
As well, I'm assuming just accepting their parents for who they choose to be.
Yes.
As opposed to who they always wanted them to be. I think that's a good self-conclusion too. Because I've had clients who had parents that you just there's really nothing you can do. You can't make them do or be anything they don't want to do or be. How has this improved the child's life when they reconnect with the father? I want to talk about that. How does, in how has that improved that child's life, whether it's academically, socially, relationally, just everything?
Yeah, so from the data that we collect, right? Because we do pre and post surveys with our agency or whatever, and so from the feedback that we get, we've seen a lot more. We don't really get a lot of the data as it relates to academics, right? So we try to gather that information early on, but that's not something that we can consistently get because there's so many more variables, in that. So, but the things that we do capture, we do see an increase of self-efficacy. We do see an increase of how the children view themselves, view the relationship between them and their father, on how their view of their father was prior to the program versus post-program. They feel more actually just as an individual, their confidence has increased, right? Because having access to their fathers. And so and we also do some pre and post surveys as it relates to the mother and father, their co-parenting relationship. And we've seen an increase, like some remain the same. But we've seen an increase, right? We've seen some where we had to talk to one of our funders about it, which was unique because we would have a pre where it would say it was not available, right? Like there was nothing, like we don't talk is nothing. And then you look at a post and now it has data on there, and the data may be is difficult. It's hard, right? So it's just like, man, where's the improvement? Well, there's a lot of improvement because they went from not talking to now talking.
Yeah, that's a big improvement. Yeah.
Right? From not talking to now talking, we have something now. Now we have something that we can work on to move forward to get better.
That's good. No, that's good. And it takes time. We're talking about building a relationship. This is not a overnight thing. And I think just seeing what people might find as micro, that leads to macro. And when we allow ourselves to see how it progresses over time, we see the significance of them reconnecting. Now, Shon, I'm gonna ask you a question because I gotta be real with you. And I love how you said that there are some relationships that won't change, because that's the other side that we have to be honest with ourselves about too, which I would say really isn't in our control. I think that's more in the control of the people who are involved. Now, with that being said, let me speak for myself, but I think other women can relate. I was angry for a very long time. When my divorce took place, my ex-husband had moved out of state. He was married. They had their own family. So I felt like my kids got the short end of the stick. And I didn't sign up to parent alone. I was one of those mothers that I didn't keep you from seeing your children. You just weren't here. And I'm saying this because I know there's always different scenarios. We're talking about the group of people that Shon interacts with, right? Now I'm also say there's another group, and that's that group of, I didn't stop you from seeing your kids. Hell, I wanted you to get them. You know what I'm saying? And what that did, I was angry. I was resentful. And then I felt like I got a lot of the heat because you weren't here.
Yep.
And then I felt like I had to be both parents. I died to that conclusion a long time ago. But then I'm angry.
Yep.
I'm yelling at you because you ain't getting it.
Yep.
And then I feel guilty because I'm yelling at you, but I keep doing it,
Yep.
and I feel like I'm here by myself and I don't know what to do because I'm working, I'm taking care of my kids, I'm trying to be there emotionally, I'm there for everything, dinner's just all the things. And I don't want to feel like mothers are responsible for this because you can only do what you can do. But what I don't want mothers to do is to shut everybody out because of what this person hasn't done. What would be your advice? I mean, just because I would like to know from you, because the beautiful thing is that you and your wife, you all are together and you guys have a system, right? But then we also have this mother who doesn't have this system. What would your advice be? How can we not kill our son's confidence or our daughter's confidence, because that can easily be projected on them because of the hurt that we got from the dad not being here? What would be your advice about that?
My advice is this, that I tell my single moms doing it all on their own, is this: you have to deal with the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that daddy is not here at this moment, right? And so there's a couple things that I encourage them is to never badmouth the dad as much as you would want to, and how easy it is to do it.
It is.
Right? How easy it is to do it, to never do that, right? Because in your not doing that is teaching. Is teaching, is helping your children how to develop compassion, right? Is you don't want to make it where it's us against him, right? Because at the end of the day, he still or she still want her daddy. And so for you, that single mom, to start bad mouthing their dad, it's like, yeah, well, I'm in your face, I'm agreeing with you, Ma. But man, when I go to my room by myself, I gotta ask the question, like, is it you? Because I see how you yell at me. I see how you do this. Were you the reason why he left? Were you, right? So now I'm coming to my own conclusion. I'm trying to justify why I feel this way. And I'm processing it by myself because I can't bring it to you because I see how you act already about him. So I'm not bringing this to you. So I'm going to come to my own conclusion. Right. So that part of it that I tell them to try to refrain from that part. And then the other thing that I encourage is having real conversations. Right. I don't know what it is to be a man. I'm your mama. And guess what? I'm going to make mistakes. Like up front, I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to make decisions based on A, B, C, and D. We have to navigate this thing together. And the only way that we can have this success of a relationship growing forward is this, and this. We need transparency. So now I have to first become vulnerable. And one of my biggest parenting advices that I encourage, especially moms in this area, is especially when it comes to your sons, who do he need you to be in this moment? I know it's easy for you to yell. I know it's easy for you to take this, but who do he need you to be in this moment? And so if I parent through that, then I have less chances of making bad decisions or adding trauma, because I'm thinking about what you need. And guess what? If I don't know what you need, I'm going to ask you what you need, because at the end of the day, the most important thing that we're trying to do is to develop healthy, responsible humans.
I love that. That's good.
Right. And so when I lose sight of that, now it's about me and how you making me feel and what I look like and what you got to do. So now I'm just going to bring my trauma onto you. let me say this, man. It's in the book, so I give this out. About 2 months ago, my daughter got suspended from school. And she got, and this is my middle daughter who doesn't have beef with anybody. She's my introvert. She's my sweetheart. She's my everything.
Yeah.
She got suspended, and she got suspended for an almost fight. Not for a fight, an almost fight. She was around some girls that she went and got because these girls was messing with her. So she went and got her fighting friend to have a talk with this other person. And so leading up to it, I'm telling my daughter, like, yo, you need to handle your business. Her mom is telling her one thing. So here, I'm like, yo, you need to handle yours. I don't want you coming home and you saying you got beat up and so that's me, right? Just keeping it 100. So she gets suspended. So she go to soccer practice that night. I didn't put her on punishment because I knew the scenario she was telling us. So we're in the car, we driving home from the soccer practice. She starts crying in the car. And I'm like, oh my gosh, right? So I'm like, man, what is it? And I knew it was surrounding the suspension. Like, so now I'm like, man, we're going to set up a meeting with these parents. We're going to talk to these little kids. We're going to figure this out. And so she finally, and she's not the one that talks a whole lot. And she said to me, I didn't want to fight, but you told me that I needed to stand up, but you told me that. And so I'm like, oh, it wasn't about those kids that made her cry. I made her cry because I told her to defend herself.
Yeah.
Tanya, that night, I had to do the introspection. And God told me, he said, Shon, you wanted your 14-year-old daughter to defend the 13-year-old boy that you still don't have respect for. See, when I was 13 years old, I was going to get in a fight and I didn't fight. My cousin had to stand up for me, a girl cousin. And all these years, that 13-year-old boy was still living on the inside of me.
Wow.
And I wanted my daughter to defend him because I was parenting out of that 13-year-old boy was giving her advice. It wasn't her father. That 13-year-old boy who was looked at as a punk, as a wimp, all of these things was still living on the inside of me. And he was the one that gave my daughter that advice. And I had to go back to her and apologize, say, yup, that wasn't your dad who told you that. That was my trauma, baby. And I'm sorry. I shouldn't have never told you that. I wanted you to defend something that I've been living with all these years. And so I had to go back and do the work and like, yo, God, like, yo, Shon, you need to give that 13-year-old boy grace. He was afraid.
Right.
He was scared. So.
Right. Wow. That's good, Shon. That shoot. When I tell you, I told that Shon, that dude. Okay, listen. I'm just sitting here. I'm taking it all in. What advice would you give to a man who's listening right now? Because I have men who listen to my podcast, and I do believe that more men than what society gives credit for really wants to help.
Yeah.
They actually don't like being who they are, but they battle with it. They struggle with it because it requires them to be vulnerable. It requires them to take the mask off.
Yep.
It requires so much of them. What would you say to those men?
Yeah. That's I'm like, yo, you ain't the only one. And it's okay. Like for real. It is scary to take that mask off.
For sure.
So my thing is like, bro, is scary to take the mask off. It's scary to do something that you have never done before, but the thing about it is that you owe it to you owe it to your family, you owe it to, those people that you assigned to.
Facts.
Right? Like if you wasn't supposed to be here at this moment, man, you'd be gone. So you have some unfinished work to do. And what better way to do it than to do it healthy? My son right now, he plays soccer and play football. Very good athlete, works really, really hard. And so football is coming up, and he has a foot injury. And it only bothers him when he's kicking the soccer ball. And so he can play football with this hairline, stress fracture that he has. But the doctor said, like, hey, if you want to be at your best, we need to wear this boot. I know it doesn't look right. I know it's not cool looking, but you need to wear this boot.
That big orthopedic boot.
Yes.
Look, I know
Yes.
I had to wear that boot.
Yes. Right. He's like, yo, you need to wear this boot for a whole month, man. And he was crying. But I'm like, son, if you want to be the athlete that you said you need to be at your best. So this temporary condition of wearing this boot, it's only temporal. But think about the long-term impact.
Yeah.
Right. You got the rest of your. So the same thing with dad, put on a boot. Right. I know it's uncomfortable. Take your mask. I know it's uncomfortable. But like, let's do the work now, staying in there long enough to get what you never had. That was the most difficult thing for me, is staying in there. When I got to the point of quit, I'm like, oh, this is where I normally quit. What are you going to do, Shon? This is where you normally turn back. What are you going to do, Shon? So I'm like, okay, I'll stay in here a little bit longer because this is uncomfortable. Normally, this is when I hit my reset button. But I was determined to become what I never was. And so I had to stay in there. And I talked about it when I was in there, like, man, this is rough. This is scary. And I had those people around me that I can really be vulnerable and tell them, right, without judgment, but still with holding accountability. And I say this lastly, the biggest thing where everything shifted for me, I tell people this. I'll tell my cousin, and this doesn't have to be everybody's story. Had my wife and I not gone through what we went through, I wouldn't have what I have. And it sucks. We went through a very bad marital point where infidelity was there. Had we not gone through that, we wouldn't have what we have. And the reason why I say that is because we worked through it together. We were intentional.
Yeah.
And when we came out of it, we have always been intentional. We went to dinner last night and we did our check-in. We did our check-in. She like, all right, how are you? How you feeling? She know that's where we go in and we talk about it, because I used to struggle with pornography. That's my point where I can go. I'm like, hey, I'm struggling, without judgment.
Yeah. Safe space.
Safe space, right? On purpose, intentional.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yo, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good right now. I'm like, man, these are the issues. She was like, you sure? I'm like, man, my safe place. I'm like, the dopest thing that's taking place right now is my marriage. I'm like, man, all of this business stuff, it's like overwhelming. It's like I'm getting pulled and I'm like, I'm not complaining, but I'm like, my safe space is my marriage, right?
That's
and
good.
so my point to my fellas is that I had to give my wife permission to hold me accountable.
Ooh.
Because before, if she would bring something up, I was rejecting it. So I had to give her permission. And the permission comes in of like, yo, when you say something, I'm not going to justify. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm going to listen. But she knows that there's rules of engagement, right? Like you coming in, don't come in for the juggler, because you know I still have emotions. I'm still working through the too small. So don't come in and say what you're going to say to make me feel too small, because now I'm in a place where I got to, man, Shon, you how you going to respond?
Yeah. The temperament, it changes how you, that's real.
I'm just, so these are the things I do. As much as people see me working with men and, the wife and the beautiful family I have now. But these are the things I still do on a daily basis to making sure that this can be sustained, that I do the work every single day.
Mm. Hey, what do you wish, what is something that you wish maybe women knew more about and truly understood about men, especially because you work with fathers?
Yeah.
What do you think gets misunderstood a lot between both?
That men don't care. That men
Yeah.
don't care. That men don't care. And I'll give you an example. When my wife and I started, we went probably about 2 months ago. We went to dinner, and we were talking about during that time of infidelity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was a game changer for me. Well, for
Mm-hmm.
both of us, right? But I'll tell you what happened for me is when she shared what she did and why she did it, right? What was happening through the process. It changed everything. It changed everything, right? For my view of her and because I had an expectation, I had my own conclusion, and it wasn't until I dissected it, right? But the part I want to highlight is the part that I was able to share to her is that she shared with me is like, you would tell me that you was going to work on it and you was going to change your behavior. You was going to do this and do that. And she said, man, you would do it for a month and maybe 2 months. And then you'll go back to your old behavior where I was an option and I wasn't as important or a priority as, this. And she like, that's how I felt. And I was like, man, I appreciate you sharing that. I said, this is the thing. I said, you have always been a priority. I said, this is the thing though, is that as you know, I get distracted easily because I'll focus over here with you and then something takes place over here. I'm like, oh, let me go take care of this. And then I
Right.
go down the rabbit trail. I said, you just think about the way I do work. What frustrates you now about paperwork? When you asking for me to do A, B, C, and D, she was like, I never thought about that.
Right.
She was like, your
Yeah.
blind spot is that you are not the most organized. You are easily distracted. I'm like, listen, in my mind, I'm like, oh, she's straight. She's good. It was never intentional that you wasn't a priority. I just didn't know how to balance and navigate it because I loved you more than anything. But this came up and I'm like, oh, let me fix this. And it wasn't like I was intentionally like, I don't give a F. Right.
Right.
And so, with your question, is that a lot of times men don't know how to communicate and share what's really going on. So, you have to create a space for them to really be able to talk about what's really going on. And you might need a decoder ring because they may be all over the place saying what they're trying to say,
Right.
but don't know how to say it.
Right.
So don't give judgment. Like, I need you to be patient.
Right. That's real.
I
Because
need
I
you to
had
be
to learn that.
patient. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
need you to be patient and allow them, like, let's get into the core because in the serve, they don't want to say what they really want to say because why? They don't want to hurt you.
Yeah.
And so you want to create a space to where they can really be authentic and you not bring it back up. Well, when you, or what about,
Yeah.
so that happens, you're
Yeah.
not going to get anything out of them. It's
No
the same way,
solutions.
no solutions. The same way you and I was talking about earlier, Tanya, when we was talking about the child who wants to bring something to mom and can't because he sees what she says about his dad.
Yeah. That's real. Oh man. That is so good, Shon. I know you have this book, Broken Boys Become Broken Men. It is
Yeah.
coming out in July.
Yeah.
I mean, the title speaks for itself, but what is this book about and who is it for?
This book is for, honestly, it's for men and women.
Yeah.
And boys, right? Because it's going to give you the lens. Number one, from the kid standpoint, it gives the kid permission to become vulnerable, not to hold in, right?
Mhm.
It tells him early on, like, okay, I'm not going to go down those pitfalls. And then the chapter I talk about the mask at an early age, they can see, oh man, I'm wearing this mask right now. Like, man, that's how I feel. So this mask that I wear, this is how I can take it off. These are some steps, right? For women, when they read it, it will give them a better understanding of why the man that they date or used to date did some of the things that he did.
Oh,
It
for
doesn't
sure.
justify, it's
Right.
not justifying, but it's just give us some context, right?
Correct.
And then from the man lens is like, yep, that's me. That happened to me. And I can't take another step without making a decision to start working on this now. It's not too late, and it's never too late. So from every lens, they're going to be able to take something away, because I made it. I wrote a letter, and I'll tell you, like, three of the areas, chapters in there, I wrote letters to my mother, to my father, to my family, and then to me, to that 13-year-old boy. And it got really deep, right? Just straight up me talking to them about those areas. And so in that chapter is where I challenged us as the readers, like, yo, let's tap in. Who do we need to write this letter to? And what should it say? Because some of us need to write a letter to our father. He may be dead and gone. How do we reconcile this thing? Like, let's do that work. And I love the last chapter was unbroken. That's where we become unbroken. So that way we can walk in total victory. So yeah, I'm excited about this project.
Oh, man, I'm excited. I know I'm getting that book, and it's coming out in the next week or so, and I'm going to drop all of that in the chat. How can people find you, Shon?
Yeah, on all the social media platforms, I kept my name pretty consistent. Shon Hart, Shon, Hart, Hart. And then my organization is Involved Dad. And we have a website, involveddad.org, that talks a lot about the fatherhood work that we do. It also has it has the connection to all of my other social media things and services and all that stuff on there. So yeah, and then you can that's where you can find me.
Yeah, I'm gonna put all of that in the show notes. I mean, Shon, I appreciate you. When I tell you, Shon, you said so much on this podcast that I really do know that people are going to get value out of it. And I also just want to, thank you for the work that you are doing. I think is very needed. I mean, you're really out here impacting men, and that's what it's all about. You're not just behind a mic, just talking and saying what people need to do. No, you stepped into your calling and your purpose, and I know sometimes it's not always easy, but I know you're doing it for the greater good, and I just appreciate you for doing that, because we don't want to just impact one group of people.
Yeah,
It creates an imbalance, and we need more men helping men. And I just thank you for doing the work that you're doing.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, working with for real, working with women. And I'm glad that you reached out to me, right? As a fatherhood practitioner to a motherhood practitioner is dope, because I think we need to collaborate more to help
We do.
our clients to better understand the other party, right? Because when you have that mediator, it gives a different perspective. right? So yeah, and I know that we will. I think we need to create time and space for that to happen.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Yeah.
And we will,
Yeah.
because it needs, I mean, we've collaborated on
Yeah.
different occasions, but
Yeah.
no, like for real, because that's one of the things that we do in our program, is really help understand his life.
Yeah.
Because if not, there won't be empathy, there won't be understanding, and it doesn't justify. We just need to get out of our narrow point of view on things. So I really do appreciate you, Shon. I'm glad that I've met you on this journey. Probably one of the most dopest men out here to be doing the work. And thank you for stopping by with my last minute self. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Let's make it happen.
All right. Thank you, Shon. Take care. All right.
All right.